In today's video, I'm going to show you how to run comps utilizing PropStream. This is kind of the sister video to the one we put out last week on how to run comps utilizing Zillow, which I will link to now. Before we dive in, we use the MLS to run comps anywhere we have it, anywhere we can get it. However, if you don't yet have MLS access or you have leads come in that aren't in your market like we have, I'm personally utilizing PropStream to run comps on opportunities to try to come up with what properties are worth after repair values or ARVs. So kind of diving in, we're going to comp out the first rental property I ever bought in Indianapolis, one we still own. Did pretty well, if I do say so myself. So I actually bought this property for $90,000 and we spent less than 20 on our initial renovation. We had a private lender loan for $120,000, which was 75% of $165,000, which is what we thought it was worth at the time. Our bank actually cash out refied this one, totally paying off our private lender, kind of in those 120s range. So substantial amount of equity in this property. And that's one of the reasons that I love purchasing newer, nicer rental properties. They're also typically a lot easier to manage, typically easier asset class, less in repairs, etc. But let's go ahead and dive into running comps on this particular property. Now, before we get too far in, I do just want to point out that their comparables or their value, this is kind of like their Zestimate, right? A human hasn't really looked at this and narrowed it down like we're going to do. So you can use these as like a quick litmus test, but you do really want to personally look at the data and come up with your own decisions. So first thing I'm going to do is remove these properties to the east of this Howell Road. Reason being, I'm always trying to stay in the particular neighborhood, typically looking to be within half a mile within the past 6 months. And I'm going to go back further in time before I go out further in distance because, you know, property north of Greenfield, for instance, is a major street. Some of these subdivisions could be gated or something like that, or on a golf course or something. It's really just not going to be a comparable. So first thing we're going to do is cut these out, which PropStream sorts by distance. So this is pretty easy. So we're just going to go ahead and cut out everything below 9. Now, running comps is where you do really want to be conservative. So if I just ran with this and took some of these high ones, I could be like, oh, cool. My house is worth $215,000. Now, I know for a fact that it's not. So we want to kind of dive into this a little bit more and narrow it down even a little bit further. So what we're looking at first and foremost is any outliers. So 143,000, for instance, is pretty low. If we click and go through these pictures, we can see that this was some sort of a foreclosure, an REO, some sort of a distressed sale, right? I mean, for goodness sake, they didn't even clean the carpet. It doesn't even look like they ran a vacuum. Really, really basic kind of builder grade property. Doesn't surprise me at all that this one went for as low as it did. So this was kind of a distressed as is sale. Another way we can see that is by, you know, how long it took this property to sell versus the single digits we're seeing everywhere else. So that one I'm comfortable to remove as an outlier. That's what we call an as is comp. Now on the flip side, 216,000 also feels pretty optimistic to me. So looking at this, this is the house that went for $216,000. This one's mine. So this is my kitchen, vinyl plank flooring, loft, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, kind of tan and white, you know, typical rental paint scheme. If I look at this one, this really isn't a comparable sale. This thing has brick. It's much more of a typical house, right? My garage is on the backside under the property. Theirs is out front like a normal house. I actually think my house is nicer. It could be that, you know, I didn't paint the walls gold, but we look at things like the kitchen and, you know, we can start to see, okay, we're really not comparing like to like. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out that $216,000 sale. Same thing with this $210,000 one, which I Googled before I started recording just for the sake of your time. Kind of a similar property, a little bit nicer of a home. You know, you can see that they actually call ours like row houses or single family, which isn't like a typical row house. I think that's just kind of how they're describing the style. But so this has us with an ARV of $180,467. I am super confident in that dollar amount. So what we're doing here, you know, you could make the argument that the property is worth $196,000. Or you could also make the argument that, well, maybe it's only worth $170,000. What we're truly looking for here is the average. And we're kind of looking at this from the standpoint of, if an appraiser runs comps, what is the average value that they're going to come up with? Now, you could say, well, I'm going to be even extra cautious and say it's worth $175,000. That's totally fine. For me, I'm comfortable. You know, I know my product is going to be at least average, if not a little bit better, but I'm going to go ahead and slap it with kind of that average ARV. Now, one thing I do want to point out, if you go too conservative, is you're going to cost yourself opportunities because you're going to be undervaluing the property. So it's one of the reasons, you know, a lot of investors that kind of struggle to get deals, they could be underestimating the value or overestimating repair costs, or they don't have a funnel and they're not going, you know, direct to seller looking for off-market opportunities, like how we found this one. This property actually, interestingly enough, came off of a mailing campaign to folks who'd recently filed divorce. So I am pretty comfortable with the comps on this. One just kind of quick thing that I want to point out, they have public records available. So if you're in a market where they have MLS data, by all means use it. Their public record is states that are non-disclosure laws. So they're going to look at things like Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, kind of other public data sources to try to figure out what did they think this sold for, versus in a lot of markets now, they actually have an MLS feed and can tell you, you know, hey, the agent would have been fined had they not put in $187,900. One other quick thing I want to show you, because this reset, if I just went with their average value without filtering it out like I did, I would think this property is worth $14,000 more than I truly believe it is. So definitely make sure you're not just running with what pops in here, and you're actually taking the time to look at these, particularly prior to going under contract on anything. But that is kind of in a nutshell how we are running comps on PropStream. Last little quick note, and then I'll let you run. We're typically looking to be within 6 months and a quarter to half mile. I would go back in time before I would go further out. We also want to make sure that we're comparing like to like. So for instance, a 4-bedroom home doesn't really comp to a 3-bedroom. A 2-bath really isn't the same as a 2.5 if I want to get picky, right? Similarly, we're looking for at least at max, about a 20% difference in lot size as well as square footage. Year built, I don't really care about as much as long as we're within like the same, you know, general region. Now, I would say a property built in 2020 should be worth more than one built in 2005. Same thing if there was one in here that was valued in like this, or that was from like the 70s or 80s, I'd maybe cut that out. But that is in a nutshell how we run comps on PropStream. Hope you found that helpful.